On August 6 of 1965, President Lyndon Baines Johnson signed into law the Voting Rights Act of 1965. This was an extremely important law which provided protection and also outlawed discriminatory practices in certain states against African Americans and other persons of color trying to vote. The power of the ballot, the power of the vote, is the most single powerful action that we as citizens have in our democracy. It is the ability to create laws and public policy by a single action. It's also the ability to send those to represent us in our legislatures, also in federal government and local governments, in order to create laws and public policies that govern our society. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 outlawed discriminatory practices such as literacy tests, such as grandfather clauses, and also intimidation for African Americans, more specifically, going to the polls to vote. Whether it was the March from Selma to Montgomery or other actions taken by civil rights icons and leaders during that time period, the right to vote is a fight that we've had since the beginning, really, of the inception of this country. It's a fight that has been fought across all generations, and we continue to fight it to this day. Why is that fight so important? Because the power of the ballot is, again, the most powerful weapon that we have here in our democracy today. The 1965 Voting Rights Act has been under attack since it was passed. More specifically, Shelby County versus Holder was a Supreme Court decision, a 5-4 decision, which started the dismantling of the Voting Rights Act. Here, under this particular case, the Supreme Court ruled that it was unconstitutional for the pre-clearance portion of the Voting Rights Act, more specifically Section 5 and also 4B. Here, under this formula, for 40 years, states and localities that historically discriminated against African Americans and other persons of color to vote had to have their lines and policies and provisions for voting pre-cleared by the U.S. Department of Justice. The Supreme Court saw that this provision was no longer needed because there were no more discriminatory practices that came into play. Little did we know, after that passage of that very important Supreme Court decision, states and other localities started immediately passing policies and laws which made it harder for African Americans and other persons to vote. From stricter ID laws to limiting locations to vote, to also limiting time to vote, and passing provisions in order to register individuals to vote. All of these discriminatory practices are turning the clock back to what the Voting Rights Act of 1965 meant to correct. So the fight for voting rights is a fight that continues today. It's a fight that we should continue to move forward with smart legislation to outlaw discriminatory practices for this generation and generations to come.